today, but that's not where we're going to end up. What we have been learning is the fact that God speaks to us. So here's what I want you to do. I didn't put this in your notes, but I want you to find a place in your notes, and I want you to write this phrase down. You ready? God is always speaking to me. God is always speaking to me. Now, turn to your neighbor and say, God's always speaking to you.
God is always speaking to me.
Now say, are you listening?
Are you listening?
See, we've seen how God, even in times of decision making, we looked at Joseph and Mary and how God spoke to him and told him what to do in that situation. We looked at the wise men, how they went to find Jesus, and then Jesus told them, don't go home by the same way, go by a different way, and he warned them. And then last week we kind of looked at how Herod was going to destroy all the kids 2 years old and younger, and God through the angel and through dreams told Joseph to leave and then go down to Egypt. So now we're going to begin looking at Matthew chapter 3. Now, I'm going to give you a little quiz and just see how far or how much you've listened. If you remember, we said that at the between Matthew chapter 1, verse 25, and Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, about how many years have expired in that time, in that little white space? Remember what I said?
75.
Huh?
75?
No.
No.
No. Between Matthew, at the end of Matthew chapter 1 and the beginning of Matthew chapter 2. 2 years. 2 years happened. Okay? Now here's the next question. Between Matthew chapter 2, verse 23, and Matthew chapter 3, verse 1, do you know how many years are listed in that white space between those two verses? Anybody want to take a guess? 18 years. 18 years expired in that one little white space, because when Matthew chapter 2 goes to a close, that's all we hear about Jesus. We don't hear too much about him. Luke chapter 2 is probably the only gospel that really tells us, and he just gives us a hint of what the life of Jesus was like. So, if you want to turn there, Luke chapter 2 verse, there are two verses in the book of Luke, in that chapter 2, that we're going to look at. That just tells us what goes on in the life of Jesus. So find me Luke chapter 2, verse 40 first. If you want to turn there, or it just says this: the child continued to grow and became strong, increasing in wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. That's one thing that we hear about Jesus. He grew strong. He went through all his adolescent life, and he grew in the grace of God and in wisdom. And then find verse 50, Luke 2, verse 52 says this: and Jesus kept on increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. Now, if I was going to ask you this question, I'm going to ask you the question. If we want to win people to the Lord and invite them to our church, what in that verse that tells us how we ought to get it done?
Ask.
Yeah, but Robert, keep the verse up there, please. Yeah, you got to grow in favor with people. How do you grow in favor with people? Interact. You ask questions. You want to know what they're like. You build friendship. It's called connecting with people. So we have to grow in favor with, I'm going to use the phrase backwards, but it should be the way it's in the verse. But we got to grow in favor with men, and we got to grow in favor with God. I mean, I look at that verse thinking, if we can just reach into our community and get to know people on your job, wherever it is, and if we can grow in favor with them and with God, they're going to say to us, now there's something different about you. And you're going to say, yes, we got the greatest church. You ought to come here and just visit us. Make it your home church. You know? So that's what, and see, when I think about that verse, at some point, Joseph is never heard from again. Scholars believe that at some point he died when Jesus was a younger person. Although Jesus does have brothers and sisters, at some point he passed away. So Jesus became like the breadwinner of the house, and he is known as the carpenter's son. So if you're in business, you got to grow in favor with people in order to draw business, and you got to go in favor with God for Him to bless you. So after that, everything goes silent. Nothing is heard from Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew until chapter 3, until 18 years later. We only have one story, and I feel like I can say this correctly. We only have one story in the Bible of Jesus as a young person. It's the only story we have of his life. He's like 12 or 13 years old. Then everything goes quiet. So I'm going to ask you a question. It's the title of our message. Have you ever lost God? Now, I didn't say, has God lost you? Has there ever been a time in your life where you lost God? I mean, you can say yes or no, unless you're too afraid to say, maybe I did. I know I have, okay? I know I have. Now, I say, have you ever lost God? Because Jesus and God are the same person. As God the Father, God the Son. He said, I and the Father are one. But do you know there was a time when Mary and Joseph lost Jesus? They lost him. How do we lose Jesus? How in the world do we ever find in our lives that, yeah, I lost God somewhere along the line? We all do it. Let me go to the story in Luke chapter 2. Because there's some very interesting words in this passage that's going to help us find out how it happens in our lives that one day we begin thinking, I think I've lost God somewhere along the way. So I'm going to begin reading in verse 41. We're going to read to verse 52. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he became 12, they went up there according to the custom of the feast. And as they were returning after, did I say Luke? Okay. After returning from the full number of days, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents were unaware of it, but supposed him to be in the caravan. And they went a day's journey, and they began looking for him among their relatives and acquaintances. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem looking for him. Then after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When they saw him, they were troubled. They were astonished. And his mother said to him, Son, why? Can you imagine getting mad at Jesus? You're scolding Jesus? Son, where was I?
48.
Okay, then him, Son, why have you treated us this way? Behold, your father and I have been anxiously looking for you. And he said to them, Why is it that you are looking for me? Did you not know that I had to be in my Father's house? But they did not understand the statement which he had made to them. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth, and he continued in subjection to them, and his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Now, this is what I want to do. I want to walk through our Christian lives from this story and show you how it's possible for us to lose God somewhere in our lives, in our relationship with Him, and then find out the steps that we have to take once you realize you've lost God. What are the steps that we have to take in order to find Him? Okay? When I think of the Christian life, we come to know Jesus, and it's a very exciting life. Now, can you imagine Mary and Joseph? They're a young couple. You know, they're in their home now. They're back in Nazareth, and every day Jesus is growing. And I always wonder what the conversation was like between Mary and Joseph. They ever think like, can you believe how blessed we are? I mean, we get to raise the Messiah in our home. That little boy, he's the Messiah. And then, like, you let your mind wander, and you think, those hands, they made the world. When he cried, that was the voice that spoke on Mount Sinai. Everything in their past, he was now in their home. It must have been a very exciting time to be in their home. And you know, when we start out living for Jesus, it's a very exciting life. I mean, he's answering prayers. He's supplying things for us. It's exciting to live for Jesus, right? The first couple of weeks. I'll give you a couple of years. And then something happens. Our text said this. I want to make sure I'm up with the notes. Now there's excitement, but after a while, the excitement can wear off. Look at here. Now, his parents went to Jerusalem every year. Mark, if you're highlighting your Bible, I'd highlight every year. At the feast of the Passover, and when he became 12, they went up there according to the custom of the feast. It became a custom to go up there every year. You could trade the word custom and say it became their tradition to go up there. Now, in churches and in our lives, we can become familiar by doing certain things all the time. Now, I wear everything in a row. I have rows of everything. And I got to wear the first one before I can wear the next one. And if I get that way, I just can't handle it sometimes. I remember I used to have a brown suit and some red pants. They're like wine-colored pants. And I dreaded those days. Because I had to wear a brown suit. Then it came time for I had to wear those red pants, and Nancy would say, then just don't wear them. I said, man, that is so hard for me not to wear them. Then get them behind the line. They got weeks to show up again. But see, what can happen is we can become so steeped in tradition we lose Jesus. Now, there's nothing wrong with tradition. There's nothing wrong with customs. But when they take the place of Jesus, we're beginning to lose Him and worshiping all of our traditions and doing the same thing over and over again. This is why I'm so glad you, the church, want to be like a teenager. To where when you come to church, we don't know what we're going to do. I mean, we got a plan. But I've always wanted to be the kind, and this is the first church when I really felt open to be able to do what God wants us to do and not feel guilty when I get home on Sunday morning. Okay? Because there have been times when I've tried that and then people didn't like it. And I'd hear about it by Monday, you know. But we don't want, we become accustomed, and when we begin to deal in customs, all the excitement of Jesus just goes away. And then all at once, what happens then is the feast is over. They're on their way home, and it said this, they didn't even think about Jesus. You know, you would think as a parent, if you're the parents of the Messiah, I'd want to make sure I knew where he was. You know, if I got this kid in my house, I want to know where he is all the time, that he's not getting into trouble and messing up his messiahship somehow along the way. But Mary and Joseph, after they leave the feast, they go home, and our text says they assumed he was with all the other kids. Here's what can happen. You and I can take Jesus for granted. We think, you know what, he'll always be there. I don't have to worry about him because whatever I do, he's just going to show up sometime. And pretty soon, we've gone 3 days and we haven't even thought about Jesus because we're thinking he's always going to be there. He's always going to show up somewhere along the way. And then he doesn't. Have you ever had that time in your life when you wake up, when you wake up some morning or sometime, whatever it is, say, you know, I haven't even thought about Jesus for like 3 days. He hasn't even crossed my mind. Because I'm just assuming that whatever I'm doing, he's blessing. So we do. We take God for granted, that he'll always be there. But I have found out this in life. It's easier for me to bless what God is doing than to get him to bless what I'm doing. Because we always have this idea that whatever I do, God will always bless me from behind because he's always going to be there. And I have found in my life that doesn't always work. I would rather have God on my side and blessing, saying, God, you just lead me, and I'll show up, and I'll do what I have to do. I'll bless what you're doing. You just bless me and tell me what to do. That's why I say to you, God is always speaking to us. We may not hear him because maybe we don't have good spiritual ears yet. But by the time we're done here in this church, I'm going to have you have spiritual ears to where you hear what God is saying to you. And I don't know what we were talking about the other day, Nancy and I were, about phrases that we always learn and say back. And one of the phrases we have here in this church is, just ask the Father. Just ask the Father. And we say, when we ask the Father, what do we have to do now after we've asked the Father? Listen to what he's going to say to us. And once he's said something to us, now what's our 2 words after that? Trust and obey. I guess that's 3 words. Trust and obey. That's why if you ever in your life, and it's going to happen to all of us at some point in our lives, and I don't care how long we've walked with Jesus, this was going to happen to us. There's going to come a day when we're going to realize, I think I've lost God somewhere along the way. Hopefully, it's not too often, but it can happen to us. So here's Mary and Joseph. It's nighttime. It's supper time. They can't find Jesus. He didn't come home for supper. They've lost God. And now Mary and Joseph, I think they're panicking. We've lost God somewhere along the way. And so now, have you ever had that time in your life when you realize one day, I've kind of missed God someplace? We all have. When you come to realize, I haven't checked in with God for a day or two, you begin to wonder, what's he thinking about me? So here's Mary and Joseph. It's supper time. And Jesus doesn't come home. All the kids came home to their camps. Their family's all feeding them. And what do? Mary and Joseph put together a plan. One of the things we have to do when we first realize we've lost God is realize that Jesus is not with us and that we've lost him. We have to realize that. There has to come that point in our lives when you realize, I haven't talked to Jesus for You put in the time limit. And one day you realize he's not there. So what do? Mary and Joseph began looking for him. They're like a day out. I always wondered, did Mary and Joseph start back that night? Or did they say, you know what, let's wait till morning. Let's get some sleep. You know, I don't want to, we got to walk all the way back at night. There could be robbers out there. You have no idea what's going to, let's just stay here. I don't think that was even on their minds. After supper, if they ate, they packed up and so began walking back to Jerusalem. You gotta realize you've lost him, and then you gotta start looking for him. And that's not always an easy thing to do. In fact, our text says, when they got back to Jerusalem and they found him, what his mother said to him was this: "We have been anxiously searching for you." I think that's a fascinating phrase. They just didn't go like, "Where is he?" No, they anxiously sought for him. When you realize that you have lost God in your life and you want him back, it can't just be like some random search. You gotta be determined to find him. Mary and Joseph, they were determined to find the Messiah, to find God. It can't be like a random search. I bet you they went to every hotel in town and every cafe they ate at or wherever they were, and they had one question they asked everybody: have you seen Jesus? Do you know where he is? See, it wasn't a casual search. They were looking hard for him, anxiously. Do we ever get anxiously searching for Jesus when we realize we haven't talked to him for a while? Do you ever have those times in your life, and I've had them often, when I realize that my Bible reading isn't just as personal as it was 2 weeks ago? And you ask God, like, what is going on? Someone gave me the advice. They said, read the Bible until it speaks to you. Well, I've tried that. And there are days it doesn't speak to me. Then I ask God, what has happened? And then the next day, you open your Bible, it's like, whoo, everything just falls off the page at you. Changes your life. Mary and Joseph, they sought anxiously for Jesus. And they found him. Where did they find him? Where had they been?
Temple.
Do you know where you're going to find Jesus?
Where you left it.
Where you left him. You will always find Jesus where you left him. You left him a couple days ago in your devotions. You know what? He's still there. In fact, some time ago, Jill and I did that little play about Jesus. You know what? He's always there waiting for us. And I've always encouraged you to have a place where you go meet with him. And for a while, that works out pretty good. It's fun. He's speaking to us, and we're learning. And then one day, I think what God does once in a while, I think he hides from us. Why do you think, now I don't think Jesus was hiding from his parents, okay? We're going to come back to that. But why do you think God would hide from us?
Make us grow.
Huh?
To make us grow.
Yeah. How are we going to grow? Well, we go looking for him. You see, he's always speaking to us. He always has so much he wants to share with us. And sometimes we lose him. I've lost him. All of us have. If we're honest, we've all gone through this. And we realize we got to get back to him. We got to go. We got to go find Jesus. And you find him right where you left him. He was in the chair Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday I didn't make it. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Now it's Sunday. I think, I got to get spiritual for church. I better go get in the chair. You know what you're going to find out? He's still there. Right where you left him. Now what do you do? What do you do? Oh, I don't have that on the paper. It's not in your notes. You see, God's always in the business of teaching us lessons. He speaks, he teaches. It says this. When they found when they found Jesus, they were pretty upset with him. Why have you done this to us? He said, I've been here all the time. Don't we all say that to God when we lost him? Man, why didn't you tell me you're going in that direction? He said, well, I've been talking to you. You left me standing here, and now you've come back. And then Jesus says, didn't you know that I had to be in my Father's house? Now it all made sense. Then it says this, Mary treasured all these things in her heart. When you go back and find God and you find Jesus in your life and you ask him what happened, and he speaks to you and tells you this is what happened, treasure all the lessons that he gives you in your heart. Because I just wrote down a couple of these lessons. I mean, if you got room in your notes, this is some of the lessons that I wrote down. When you find him, treasure the things in your heart, because other things will come up and you will need the lessons. You know, once you've learned this time, because as life goes, it gets busy and we learn and we forget. And sometimes we all lose God. Remember everything he's taught you. So that's that when you find him, the lessons will continue. Because here's what I always think the Christian life is, and I'm going to close. The Christian life is walking up steps. Let's just say, okay, every step is like a different level with God. Okay? We climb up there spiritually and we get there. And the steps are really kind of cool. You got a nice carpet on there, and you live and you grow. And then you realize, okay, now there's one more step. So what we do is we crawl to the next step. The carpet's nice. And every time we go to a different level with him, we're always learning new lessons about ourselves and about him and what he has for us. You see, but in our Christian life, we never want to don't ever want to stay on one step. Okay? Don't ever get used to living in the custom of what one step is like when there's so much more upstairs. And every time God is leading us up to the next level. And I want to tell you, as a church, I don't know how long we've been here, but however long it is, I have seen you go from one step to the next. I hear it in your voices. I hear it in what you say, how you deal with things. And you know what? God is always calling us to a higher level, so we got to learn each lesson. And whatever God tells you, treasure those things in your heart. And there's one more thing I want to say to you that I've learned in all this Christian life. There are lessons God teaches us that are just for ourselves. Okay? There are lessons he teaches us that he wants us to share with other people. The ones that are just for us, treasure those things in your heart and just live in them for a while. and drain out every kind of lesson you can from what God has for you. So this morning, if you come to church and you saw the title of the message and you realized, yep, somewhere along the way, I lost him someplace. And I don't care. And I don't care how many times you've lost him. You can always come home. You can always look for him. And I will guarantee you that you can write this down, take it to the bank, whatever you want to do. He will always be where you left him. He'll always be there. And he'll say things to us and speak to us because God is always speaking to us. Let's stand this morning.